I want to build on something we talked about last week, because I went away going, I did kind of contribute, but I wasn't truly happy with how I contributed, and I want to kind of develop on a word that I used to describe things. So you were talking last week about novelty, and about how we do want novelty in our lives, but if we're so scattered chasing the next new thing here, there, and everywhere, number one, we become frazzled. The texture of our mind becomes scrambled, because we're constantly switching what we're focused on, and we don't single down on one or a few things and get really good at those and master those. And so you have to kind of walk the line between too much and too little novelty. And I was listening to a podcast about I know it sounds so rogue, but here we go. I listened to a podcast about the relationship between autistic people and the autistic mind and human innovation, and like systemic thinking about things in systems, and basically human improvement, and it was really interesting. And one of the points that was made was about innovation being such a human characteristic. And the speakers put it in the context of tool use, right? So they said that like a chimpanzee will use a rock to open a nut, let's say, and that's like tool. That's the animal discovering a tool that helps them achieve a goal and manipulate reality in a more valuable, effective way, because they can access the food in the hard shell of the nut that they couldn't do without the rock. Excellent. But then the chimpanzee doesn't necessarily try and innovate and go, well, how can I make the perfect rock that like breaks the nut at quickest speed or in the most effective way? How do I improve this process? Because the process already works. The chimp just finds a rock, whacks the nut, it's done. Whereas a human being takes a tool, let's say, and I think tool I use here in a very broad sense. It doesn't have to necessarily be a physical tool. It can be a piece of technology or a mechanism, a machine, a system. And we don't just go, okay, that works. We go, it works, but how can we make it better? Right? How can we innovate and improve so it's more effective, so the way that we manipulate reality is more valuable, that we can get a greater outcome from this same system? What alterations can we make? And I mean, that point itself isn't necessarily about autism. It was just a point about the human psyche and how we've got to where we are now. It's one of those things, our drive for innovation. Very interesting. Then it made me think about the human drive then for complexity, let's say. The human drive to make things more sophisticated. I guess that's a good way of thinking about it. And I was reminded along that train of thought of something I read in Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's book on flow, where he said one of the key characteristics of flow is a gradual increase in complexity in that task. Okay, so if you're an athlete, right, you don't just want to learn how to shoot the ball, let's say in a basketball context, right? You want to get your form right. You want to get pretty consistent at just static shooting, yeah. But then you want to kind of add a dribble move involved. Then you maybe want to add a defender. Then you want to maybe do it at the end of a shot clock, or then you have to kind of do it when you're tired. Or there are different ways you can add complexity to your training that then makes you more competent. Or if you're an artist, maybe you start with a more simple work and then get more complicated or more abstract or more, I don't know, but you take more time in a project and do a bigger project or whatever. We're always driving towards this complexity, or linking to the innovation point, we're trying to innovate our relationship and the way that we contend with the world in whatever like activity that is for that person, in whatever line of work or hobby or skill that you're interested in and that you're trying to develop. And so all of that being said, going back to our point last week about novelty, I said that what we want to find novelty in the known, right? By pursuing depth in that thing. Right. So, I stick to wheelchair basketball. I'm not dancing from different sports. I stick to one thing and I try and find depth in that by trying to improve as an athlete in all those ways. I want to change the word depth to complexity, because I think that does more justice. I'm trying to innovate my approach to sport, my approach to being an athlete, my approach to high performance. And I in that is that's fueled by my human natural inclination towards innovation and to improve the way I manipulate reality. And that's a really meaningful thing. And so I think that's a worthwhile thing to know, is we are constantly, we don't just want things to be good. We don't just want things to work. We want them to constantly work better and better and better and better. And so I think in our own life, we can apply that to that similar points we made last week. When you stick to a thing and you try and innovate your own approach to it, or innovate the system in which you're working, there's a lot of meaning in that. And that's the right kind of novelty, because you're confronting more and more novelty as you look for the complex and look to make things more sophisticated.
Autistic people come across to me as quite left hemisphere. They want this kind of get this right. They want this order a lot of the time, and I think that their brain is interesting. It works different to us in that way. But yeah, I'm kind of waffling now. But that's my initial thoughts.
I can talk more a bit about what I learned from that podcast, because it was like really interesting. It talked about, and I'm kind of just going off my memory here, but like, yeah, the inclination towards a system-based way of approaching the world, is how it was a researcher. I'll back it up with like the credentials of the guy. He's called Simon Baron-Cohen, and he's done like some of the most, I don't know, like, what's the right word? Some of the most impactful research in how we understand the, like, people with autism spectrum disorder, as he described it. And yeah, he talks about this focus on things, understanding the world in a system, and that's why, you know, the nuances of, let's say, the social world are sometimes absent from an autistic person's understanding of the world, but they're very good with like mathematics and those kind of more logical, and that's why your point of the left brain is kind of right. Like those logical, mathematical, systemic like phenomena really make sense to them, and that's why they can be fantastic in certain fields and like really good in certain areas of work. And he was saying, like, we should never look at these things as disorders, which I 100% agree with, because it's just their worldview and the way they interact with reality is just different to the average person, but can be so effective in certain ways. And he actually wrote a book about the relationship between autism and human innovation that I haven't read, like human invention and things like that. But I'm very cautious to talk too much on this because I'm not an expert, and I know that how it can be interpreted. But what I would say to people listening is go and like read Simon Baron-Cohen's work, because it's very interesting.
Yeah, when you bring up flow state, though, I interpreted it as kind of a metaphysical experience. I wouldn't go as far to say it's right hemisphere or left hemisphere, but I think it's kind of metaphysical in the way that when you're, maybe it is right hemisphere actually, because when you're playing football, you're playing basketball. Like, when you're playing football, you're not thinking about whether this rainbow float is going to go 2 meters up and then it's going to go at a 45-degree angle over the player. You're thinking, quick, the ball's coming to me. Quick, bam, done. Go to the next, quick pass. And it's just about your reaction time and how the use of kind of adrenaline and all these other things going on, this complexity, and what you do about that. I think it is a metaphysical experience. Like, you watch like the Golden State Warriors, and they just click. They all click together. They're like they come together like a transformer. Like, you got Steph Curry as the head, Draymond Green as a leg, and Klay Thompson as an arm. They're all a body. They're one, and they're not thinking. They're acting. So, yeah, I thought I'd add that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we like to use like these woo-woo spiritual concepts a lot because it's part of what we do. But I think when you point to that being metaphysical, I would say I would change that and say it's implicit, which is kind of like functions of the brain and the body and the nervous system that are precognitive. Like they happen so quickly that you're not involved. Conscious you is not involved. So let's say if somebody threw a plate at your head, right, and you saw that out of the corner of your eye, that object, that projectile coming towards you, you duck, right? If you're unconscious, saw that in your field of vision quick enough, you would duck and you would avoid hitting your head. You weren't involved in that. You didn't go, oh, there's a plate coming. Oh, I should probably duck. Like, there isn't time for that. So evolutionarily, we develop like implicit, reaction responses to things to help us survive. And I think we love it when we see people that have trained something so much that it's implicit, And then it looks like magic. When you watch the way that, like you say, like a team like the Golden State, when they were so dominant in the league, and like specifically like a shooter like Steph Curry, when people see the way that he scores the ball and the way that he can just like quickly release a shot, like catch and shoot when there's a defender in his face and still make it from any kind of range, it's beautiful. It's almost magic because he's trained so much. I think there's a clip of Tony Robbins talking about the number of shots Steph Curry has had to take in training compared to the number of shots he actually scored in a game. And the ratio is ridiculous. I mean, I don't know the exact figures, but it's really impressive. And so he's trained that thing so much that it's implicit when it matters. And it's tapped into that the unconscious power of the mind. And it kind of links to one of my other points today that we may get into. But yeah, I just thought I would add that because it puts it in less of a, like, go
on. Autistic people, do they have a different kind of emotional regulation when they don't feel emotion as much and they're just tuned into logic?
I don't think you can really like put that in a box and say that's the case. I think there's definitely, like, I know that because I've learned this in like uni and stuff, and from stuff I listen to, the clinical definition is they don't have what's called theory of mind, which is like, I have theory of mind because I know that you have your own mind with your own perspective and your own belief system and your own emotional system that is different to mine. Now that's the clinical definition. But I think there are people that, let's say, are on the spectrum that do have theory of mind. That's why it's so complicated. It's not as simple as just like, this is what it is. So I would never want to put someone in a box like that. Yeah, it's the case that they may struggle with some emotional things and some social things and those kind of things. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're wrong. That's just the difference in how they're wired. So it's very interesting. I can send you the podcast if you're interested.
I think, Ryan's approach of there's not a disability, it's a difference. I think that's the right way to go about autistic people, or any of these people, is they have strengths that I don't have. I'm not going to be, I'm guessing these autistic people, they're very good engineers and mathematicians and things like that.
Yes,
my brain just isn't wired to do. So yeah, and they never lie as well, don't they? I swear, autistic people, they always tell the truth, and that might be because of that.
I don't know. I don't know if that's the blanket statement we can make, but that's why be wary of blanket statements like that. Perhaps, maybe.
I can go into your other point, and then I'll go into my big point.
So I was thinking, a thought hit me the other day, but then I expanded on, and the thought was, the way to improve the spoken word and your like ability to articulate yourself verbally is most often through writing. Now, why is that? That's what you're asked to do. If you want to become a better speaker, you read and you write, but writing specifically, I think, is what has been the biggest mover for me, and is what's suggested by a lot of people that are very knowledgeable and competent in that area. And then the conclusion I came to is because the written word has to have a real great level of precision to it. Because let's say, even if you had a transcript of a conversation between two very articulate people, it would still be a little bit messy. There would still be repetitions of words, or they would overuse the word so, or there would be a pause, or there would be little grammatical errors in how we speak, because we don't speak perfectly. Nobody speaks perfectly. We kind of just speak well enough that the other person understands what we're talking about. That's like just how functional the spoken word has to be. But in the written word, if you came to write an article, we came to write a book, or even just like a tweet or a small little sentence, you want the grammar to be right. You want it to make sense. You want to try and pick the right word that really gets across what you're trying to say. And so the practice of writing then practices that skill of communicating verbally in a precise manner. And when you can do it more and more in the written word, you practice that skill, and then it becomes more part of your speech, that precision, if that makes sense. And then I was like, well, when I speak, and when everyone, when all of us speak, and especially those who are really good at it, it's not really a thought out thing. And when I'm trying to communicate an idea on the podcast, I have the idea, hold it in the front of my mind. But it's kind of ineffable. It's not written down. It's not like I have a script here that I'm just like reading in my mind. My brain just kind of forms the right words and phrases and sentences to try and communicate that idea. So in a sense, it's unconscious, it's implicit. I just produce what my mind kind of bubbles up from the surface when I try and like have that idea. And so it linked to me, it referred back to things I'd written about sport and the importance of training something until it's unconscious in order to perform well. And I kind of touched on it there when we talked about Steph Curry. Making it implicit, making it unconscious, that's when you know you've mastered something. And I go, okay, those principles that I've thought about in sporting context, I can apply to my like intellectual pursuit, to the podcast, to my writing, to my thinking, to my philosophies. And go, if I practice the written word, right, through my daily journaling or writing or whatever, and I read deep, valuable information, and most importantly, I use the podcast as a playground for these ideas and speaking about them and articulating on them, then that the pathways and the words that I use to describe and explain an idea, they become unconscious. And that when it comes to like, I don't know, moments when I want to be a speaker in the future, or when we do any like speaking gig or anything like that, or even just when I'm in a conversation in my life with somebody important, somebody I want to really get across an idea to, I'm ready. I've got the kind of arsenal of information. It's implicit in my brain, and I can just move through those pathways, and I don't have to be involved in the process. Just like how I talked about when I shoot the basketball in big moments, I don't want to be involved in the process. I just want to let my body do what it knows how to do. So I'll finish there and see if you have any thoughts.
It's yeah, it's a very interesting concept, because I've heard you use phrases before about like when we speak in a conversation, it's not us, it's not us that's putting forward that idea, and how we sort of become the conversation. And I think one of my interesting straight away takeaways is that all these meaningful unconscious experiences where you feel like you become that thing. So in a conversation, playing football, playing basketball, playing chess, whatever, that thing is something that's bigger than you, and it's bigger than everyone around you. So you do become that thing. It's because it's not about us as this kind of thinking thing. We're transformed into hyper quick action and intensity, and you're not kind of, your identity goes away from you and you become the thing itself, a member of that game.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's 100% right. It's yeah, it's something. There is something meaningful about that. And I've been reading The Creative Act by Rick Rubin, last few days, and he talks about similar concepts to Stephen Pressfield's work, The War of Art, talking about the muse. Rick Rubin calls it the source. That a lot of our ideas are not ours; they don't feel like ours, and I kind of relate to it in that I learn something, it goes into my brain, but I don't fully know, and I don't fully think out how I'm going to then describe it to you. It is like there's something feeding me this information. Now, if you're more skeptical, then you could just say that's my brain and that's my unconscious and that's my memory system, and that's great. You know, very true. But maybe a symbolic way of describing that process is this idea of a muse or a source or a creative source being external out there in the universe that then possesses me to then perform in the way that I do, speak in the way that I do. It's interesting. It's interesting.
I mean, that's often, I think the example used is when someone's writing, and there has to be a source for those ideas. And so you then get into a weird kind of thought pattern of, what is this news type of things? Why is it presenting the ideas that it is? Maybe because your brain's tuned to a certain frequency. I don't really know the answer to that.
Maybe there isn't an answer, man. But yeah. Anyway, I was just thinking about that. The theme of, if you train something enough consciously, it becomes unconscious. It becomes implicit, and that's a key aspect of mastery.
I was just going to say, like, if people aren't like writers, and they haven't got kind of the same pattern, like, maybe how can they apply that unconscious?
I guess I would say find the fundamentals of that thing and like do them so much that you master them. Because if you want to get really good, I think, and I see this in basketball, I see this in writing and stuff, if you get the fundamentals right, the core ideas, the core movements, then you will be like you'll be so confident then to build upon those. And once they become implicit, you're in a really, really good position. So like, I don't know, if you're studying or something, what are the biggest points that you know you can use in that like a subject area in an essay you write, or what's most likely to come up in the exam or something? make that the thing that like unconsciously. But just I think that approach of going to the fundamentals, don't overcomplicate it, just train and do the right thing. Do the simple stuff right. I want to say it was an MMA fighter or it might have been a basketball. It was an athlete anyway. And I remember that I'm annoyed that I can't remember who said this because it's something I think about a lot. But he said he was asked about like his training or whatever, and he was like, he just said, chop wood, carry water. And he was like, just do the simple things right. Chop wood, carry water, train, eat well, sleep. I just like that. So do the basic things right and get them like smooth, and you'll be all right. And I'm still working on that myself in all the areas of my life. But pivot onto your big point.
I'm reading Plato's Republic, and it's going quite well actually. I'm going for it quicker than I thought it'd be. And at the moment, there's a lot about morality and what makes the perfect society and things like that. And there's one interesting question that was like, does the good man live a happier and better life than the evil man? And Socrates says yes. And this is his, I guess, starting argument. And I'll say each line that he says, and I'll let you respond. So, is it fair to say that everything has a function and an excellence? So, do the eyes have the function of sight? Would you say that's fair to say?
Yeah.
Could the eyes perform their function if their excellence had the corresponding defect? So, could the eyes perform their function if they were blind?
No.
So, would it be fair to say that life is the function of the mind?
Oh, I don't know. That's that. Life is a more complicated phenomenon than just the mind. I think the mind is how you experience and make sense of life, but it's not what brings life itself, I want to say.
Okay, we'll pretend you said yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Will the good mind perform the functions of control and attention well, and the bad mind badly? Yeah. Okay, would it be fair to say that good is the excellence of the mind and evil is defect?
Yes.
So the good mind will have a good life and the evil a bad life?
Yeah, if we're thinking that good means living your life morally right, yeah, and not just like for the wills of your own like ego and for pleasure and hedonism things.
Yeah, so that's Socrates' starting argument. Now, I think it's called Glaucon, and he argues against it. And this is his argument. People are generally selfish, and it's natural for us to pursue our own interests regardless of others. And we kind of, in society, we know that, but we kind of compromise on morality so that the society is orderly, because if everyone put in their self-interest, it wouldn't necessarily work. And there was also an interesting point you made that being evil and being bad is kind of the easy way, because there's a smoother road, there's other people trying to do it. If you're a great virtuous man, like, any kind of great man, maybe Michael Jordan, that's very difficult. You're on your own, you're trying to pursue your truth and inspire, but the guy that's kind of just in a bar drinking and maybe unfaithful to his wife, that's an easy alternative. And for a man, so Glaucon said that for a man to be good, he has to want to be good rather than seem good. So another way to think about it is they have to be not very outcome focused and in it for the actual goodness of itself. So if that's true, then we mustn't allow the good man. The extent to this is that we must not allow the good man to seem good. Otherwise, he will have the rewards paid to him. Actually, let me say that again. We must not allow him to seem good, as if he does, he will have all the rewards paid to the man who has the reputation for justice. So we must strip back everything apart from the actual pure justice itself. So the just man, the hyper extent to this is that he must have the worst reputation for wrongdoing, so we can test we can test his justice under the weakness of unpopularity. Whereas the unjust man, he reaps through schemes that bring him respectability. They give him wealth. They allow him to marry well because he has that reputation. And the way that the world works is it rewards appearance rather than reality. So the kind of assumption here is that good brings about suffering. For you will be punished as it's a corrupt world. You'll be going against the convention, which also inspires a lot of Machiavelli's thoughts of ruling through deceit and gaining power through deceit. So people ask a lot. There's this kind of divide between your reputation of being good and actual being good itself, and then then that poses a lot of questions about should you curate this reputation? Is it that seems to be a lot of the kind of what I'm pushed is to curate it. And reputation, I mean, it's an important thing. It gets you into rooms. Everyone has a personal brand. And maybe, Robert Greene would work, he says to be a master of it. And so this is something that's very relevant to us. But I guess to put this into a personal way that we can understand is we try to be good by being authentic online, which can be seen as a virtue, which is why that attracts hate and envy, for it is a corrupt world. Justice makes you suffer because the world doesn't value real goodness. And I think I'll pause there because I want to make this all kind of make sense up to this point.
Yeah, I made a couple notes. First note I made was that I think it's something you roughly pointed on, but that it's far easier to define a bad/immoral path than a good/moral path.
Yeah.
You even used Michael Jordan as an example of what might be a good life. But then I posed to you, was he friendly to his teammates? No. There are horror stories of how he treated his teammates. Was he a friendly character, a good moral character on the basketball court? Well, he was good at the function, let's say, of the basketball game. But was he a moral sportsman? Not always. Is he the greatest player of all time? Yeah, potentially. But was he a good man in getting there? I don't know. That's why you do. It's much easier to define the things that we'd all probably collectively say, no, we don't do that. Do you know what I mean? If you're in a stable state of mind, don't murder people, don't steal, don't abuse people, don't harm others unnecessarily. That's kind of the general principle. And we're all kind of in agreement of that. Well, we are all in agreement of that. But the good and moral path, that's a lot more complicated. And you're right. You can look good without doing good. So my second point that I made was that reputation cannot be the aim. Because if reputation is the aim, that's a shallow path to being good. It's not being good, it's framing yourself as good. It must emerge, reputation this is, by itself as a consequence of the value you bring. If you do that, then the reputation emerges, it precedes you and it's as a consequence of who you are. It's real, it's not shallow, it's an accurate representation of who you are. And it's kind of similar to how people these days, I think I've heard Chris Williamson say that this idea that people want to be famous just for the sake of being famous in this world. And you can kind of do that. You can build yourself up as an influencer or whatever, and you can kind of you can be famous because people follow you online. Whereas 200 years ago, the people that the collective consciousness knew about were famous because of something they did, because of stories that people would tell, things like this.
No, that's spot on. It's so much easier to define evil than is good, and that's a great example, because who's to say that Michael Jordan or Beyonce, someone with an amazing public image, isn't actually just a deceiver? How do you know they're not a Machiavellian and that I've got there by deceit? So,
and also they're just well known, right? I think there's a lot of good and a lot of moral in the things that go unseen in our society. This is like the bin man that's worked in that line of work for however many years or decades and just doesn't complain and just does a job that the majority of us wouldn't want to do, gets up early in the morning, gets it done, works long hours to provide for his family. That is good. That's a moral path. That is potentially, well, it is to me actually, that's more good and more moral than the path of being Michael Jordan. They're just different. Yes, he's inspired, let's say, thousands of people. That's good. But there's also, there's good in the small, I don't want to call them small because it's not, it's just less, in the less talked about, let's say, in the quieter aspects of society in the world that you have to take more notice to see.
Yeah, it's a deep idea. How much good is unseen, and it's quite sad as well. But that's kind of the point of Socrates' first point of that's the point of you actually have to be good at self without appearing good. And so then Socrates kind of responds. I actually thought that Glaucon argument was quite a convincing argument. But Socrates strikes back and he says the whole argument of Glaucon is built on the good reputation injustice brings. But is it possible to have a good reputation and be good? And I think yes. And then the question is such a haunting line. It said, shall I reach the higher threshold, or I think it was, shall I reach the higher stronghold by justice or by deceit? So you have two choices. And then Socrates takes it from this conversation about the individual to the community. Because, so he says, well, justice can be a characteristic of an individual or a community, can it not? Yes. Okay, so a society where all their needs are met is better than ones when their needs aren't met, only first the basic needs. And then he kind of goes down this interesting kind of counterpoint and says, okay, to start a society, you need 4 people. You need 1 to provide the clothes, 1 to provide the food, 1 to provide the shoes, 1 to provide the housing. And then that's our basic needs. And well, but then what happens is this people ends up growing because there's not enough space to I don't know, harvest the farm or something. Oh no, this is what he was going to make the farmer's tools, not the farmer himself, because it's not efficient for him to. And so then there's going to be more growth because every trade is complex, and then it goes to land and stuff, and because there's not enough land eventually in the society. So then we have to. That's how war is an inevitable start. But I think the point was basically that in a community, everything kind of changes about it, and it's about the good of everyone's needs met better than them not met. And it's like, yes, and what prevents people's needs being met? Well, evil and corruption and things like that. And so and also I link this to this kind of ideology of, if there's no difference between you thinking about yourself and negative emotion, which is one of Peterson's big claims, well, can we think about, if that's true, then what about you thinking about the community? And I think that that can be interesting. That can be interesting. I think, because I think the answer to that question, if there's no difference between negative emotion and thinking about yourself, then can we change that to thinking about the community, or at least something bigger? And that's kind of where the conversation goes to, is about thinking about these bigger things. And then I guess to finish this point, is there's a couple of other interesting bits in the book. Socrates asks, what's the biggest advantage of being rich? And he answers it and says, wealth helps a person not fall into dishonest behavior, because if you're poor, you're forced to make these morally grey choices just to survive, but wealth gives you the freedom to stay honest. Well, that was quite profound. It makes a lot of sense, to be honest. Poverty and crime are very linked in kind of our society, so I think what we have to do is extrapolate the problem of evil and help each other out, and kind of make it so it's not just a part of us in our small room with our own problems in isolation, and the community is the answer, and that's kind of where I'm at with the book now.
I like it. I just want to ponder on that point you made about Peterson's line and maybe a potential inverse to it when he says there's no difference between thinking about yourself and positive and negative emotion. And I've written here, is there then a difference between positive emotion and engaging with the community, like you said, and engaging with reality outside of the self? And then I think about our conversation with Melvin the other week and how I think I tried to distill down, let's say, positive emotion, or did I try and distill down what we ultimately want in life to the concept of connection? Connection to other people, in our friendships, in our relationships, in our family, connection to the wider community, connection to all the circles we pass through in our work, in our hobbies, in the strangers we meet in the supermarket, and all those kind of things. And also a connection to nature, and maybe a connection to
our faith.
Our faith, yeah. A connection to some kind of supernatural order and principle for what life's about. Connection to ourselves, right? And what does connection require? Well, to be connected, you need something other than the self to connect to, right? So you can't be connected if you're just thinking about yourself, because there needs to be another thing to create the connection. And so maybe we can say, is there much difference between positive emotion and connection to something other than you? Because that can be the love of your relationship. That can be, all the good qualities that come from friendship and family. It can be the way you feel when you positively affect your community. It can be the way you feel when you're walking in nature and you feel connected to the sound of the wind rustling through the trees or whatever. Or it can be, your connection to your religion, and you feeling that sense of hope, that sense of peace, that sense of you're following a good moral path. So I think maybe we pointed to something there. I like that.
Yeah, but with these sort of things, it does imply some kind of negative force that we could be connected to. But to me, connection it implies a positive relationship. But even I guess you can be connected to a lover, and then there's still periods of difficulty in a relationship. So I feel like maybe the bad force does kind of come into it a little bit as well.
Okay, that's a great point. Yeah, you can still be connected to something that doesn't serve you. So the gambler is connected to the source of gambling, is gambling addiction, but it's not a positive thing. So maybe positive emotion is upward aiming connection, or like what's the right word? What would be a good word? Like, I want to say the word moral, but then that just gets us in the same kind of cycle we've been in of like beneficial connection, meaningful, stable,
unconditional connection. Well, yeah, we have to think about that.
We'll ponder on it.
But then I guess there does come the question of, we want to broaden ourselves out and mix with other people, but eventually you do come across evil people. And it's a very good question of how do you deal with evil people, because I'll state a recent interaction that happened to me. So I was in Pret a Manger and just minding my own business, and a black man that's about 10 years older than me from the other side of the room said with some force, "Oi, dickhead, cover your mouth when you're coughing." I replied back, and then I was like, "All right, I will." And then he replied back and said, "Speak up," or something else that was quite rude. And then I repeated myself, "All right, I will." And I said it with force. And then it really, that is, because those things don't happen to me very often. So it really made me think about how should I deal with that. So this isn't the only example I think we should answer this question with, but there's a couple ways. And one way, which is also discussed about in the Republic, is this idea of this archetype of the dog, who is basically an archetype that is a guardian, because the dog has this remarkable quality of being able to bark at strangers, but welcome those and be gentle to the people that it knows. It is able to distinguish from a friend and a foe. So if I take my example being in Pret, and there would have been alterations to that. Maybe if I was with my sister or some other people, that I would have barked a bit more. I would have shut him down a bit more, because he's a foe, and I would have fought fire with fire because I can handle the heat in that situation. But that's only one way to deal with this. It's quite a short-term way. It doesn't really solve the solution of making him act like that again. There's another way, which would be to ignore and kind of go about it in silence. And I think of this with big kind of public figures that get in a lot of conflicts online, and the internet hates them. Sort of Joe Rogan, Andrew Huberman, a lot of people go through it. And the best way to deal with it, or one of the best ways, is to not give it power and actually just ignore about it, because the way the world is and social media and stuff, people forget about this thing quite quickly. And so it's law 36 of disdain things that you cannot have. Ignoring them is the best revenge, in the way that you're not trying to fix your public perception of what's happened to you. You're not giving it any more power than it deserves, and you're not amplifying the issue, because they get bigger when you apply attention, if you're one of those people. So that's two ways of dealing with evil. There's other ways of dealing with kindness, or teaching them to kind of do better. But I think about those options. It's hard, because when I was in Pret, that guy, he doesn't want to be saved. He doesn't want to be talked to. He's all ego. He's not up for listening. He's not up for compromising. So yeah, I think I'll end that bit there, and I want to know your thoughts.
Yeah, it's interesting, because the two things I wrote down, you then went on to acknowledge, because when you were making your first point, I wrote here, should we always bite back? And are evil people something we need to solve? And then you went on to talk about, well, maybe not. And I think that's the perspective I have of it's always something that's not quite right in them that causes them to be hostile. Now, he might have pointed to a good point that, you didn't cover your mouth when you were coughing or whatever. And he could have just said, mate, just can you make sure you remind yourself that you do that next time? And that would have been fine. It was the way that he told you. And that pointed to a rage that's in him. And that rage has nothing to do with you. He could be having a shit day or a shit life. And that's his shit that he's got to deal with, and not yours. So, as Jesus put, turn the other cheek. Don't fight back. Don't fight the fire with fire, because it's just going to create more burning that we don't need. But there are situations where you need to defend yourself, but that's different. I think if somebody's coming in with hostile for no apparent reason, you shouldn't engage with it.
You shouldn't give it power.
Exactly.
Yeah. But it's an important thing to. I guess maybe the answer is just very situation dependent, because we all will encounter evil people, and I think we just got to. A lot of them, I think most of them we can probably ignore.
Now, a question I want to pose to you though is that guy that shouted at you in Pret, is he evil, or is he just spiritually not okay? Is he evil? I mean, because we use words, we could use that word in a variety of contexts with different kind of power behind it. Is he evil just because he assertively told you to cover your mouth while coughing? Or is he just a bit grumpy? And should we save those words for the extremes? Should we save the word evil for Genghis Khan or the Nazis, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, he's definitely spiritually deficient. But I feel like that kind of could have been the start of things. Like, it could have been the first. That could have been something small to him. Maybe the act itself, you couldn't have said was evil, but he could have been an evil person, because if he's going doing that randomly, then that's something small that he's doing. Whereas there's a lot of things that he probably could do that's worse. Like, I don't know if he's one of those gangster guys in London, but he could have been. So I think you need to maybe assume they're capable of a little bit more than they are, and maybe action itself is very unvirtuous, and it's excess. It's definitely not good, but himself, he could be evil.
Yeah, interesting.
Have you ever had any evil interactions?
Oh mate, I had one that it rocked me physiologically for a decent while. driving, right? And I was on the motorway, and we were going down to one lane because of like some construction or whatever, something like that. And it went down to, I want to say a 50 or maybe even a 40 miles per hour. And I was like, okay, fine, standard. I think they'd cut off like the 2 or 3 left lanes, so we were all going into the right lane. Fine, bit more traffic and congestion, not a problem. So I get in that lane, and if it was a 50, I'm saying I'm probably going 45, right? And I'm keeping a safe distance between me and the car in front of me, because we could stop because someone won't want to cut into the right lane until right at the very end. And then when they do, everyone will have to slow down. And I'm just being safe, right? Making sure that like, I have enough space to brake if I need to. Anyway, this van driver comes up behind me, right? And I'm only going like a few single digits under the speed limit at this point. And I'm only going slightly slower because I want to keep that safe distance from the car in front. And he is just driving up my arse. Like I can see him in the rearview mirror, just looking like literally like so close to me. I wasn't happy about it. So I made a mistake in that I was like, okay, I don't want to completely brake check him and be a dickhead, but I'm just going to slow down a little bit. I'm saying like 3 to 5 miles an hour. No, Jacob, it's terrible. It's terrible. It's a traumatic story. 3 to 5 miles an hour, because like I want to make sure that he knows that I might brake at some point. Do you know what I mean? Because the cars it was very situation dependent. I didn't think I was being a dickhead. I honestly didn't. Maybe looking back, I wouldn't have done that now. But it's the fact I saw him so close to me. I knew that I might have to brake because the car in front of me might brake because of people cutting into the lane and stuff. So I did. Anyway, then he proceeded to come into the lane left next to me and just shout verbal abuse. Like angry. Like pitched out the window while we're going like 45 miles an hour. And he was like, how dare you try, effing and jeffing every 5 seconds. Like, how dare you try and brake check me? Like, do you know, all this kind of stuff. And I'm just like, whoa. I'm like, this is not fun. And I'm like on the driver's seat. So like, my girlfriend sat next to me is like in between me and the skis. I'm like, what are you doing, bro? Like, I didn't slam the brakes at all. I just went down like 3 miles an hour. And you were the one that was ramming up my ass anyway. So anyway, I didn't fight back, Jake. I just got scared. I genuinely did, just got scared. And I was like, okay. Then I slowed down a bit and I was like, take the go in front of me then. Like that's what I did. I was like, go in front of me. And then he didn't. And I was like, oh my day. Honestly, it rocked me for like a good 20 minutes to the point I had to stop at a service station because I was like, I can't drive right now because my hormones and my neurochemicals are through the roof. Not only because there's a geezer shouting at me, but because it was so dangerous. Like, he's not looking at the road. He's got one arm on the wheel. Anything could happen. If he moves his hand 45 degrees, we're dead. Do you know what I mean? So it was one of those where I went, wow, I definitely shouldn't have slowed down slightly, even though I thought I was doing the safe thing. But he was like, how angry do you, like, whoa, like, it was like an absolute flamethrower from a small moment on the road. And it's, wow, are you, like, he was not okay.
So is he evil? Or is he spiritually?
No, he's not. He's just angry. He's just angry. You know, I could use the word evil if he then decided to crash into me and cause us both to experience serious harm. But yeah, I don't know.
No, I know what you mean about using the word evil cautiously, because it is a big word. Like, you don't even hear evil much. It's like it's more of a kind of it is a word to describe some tragic historic acts, and it's more kind of I associate it more with an intellectual word than bad. So yeah, maybe evil isn't the right word, but yeah, you're going to encounter them, and I mean, what you did do there is you did escalate the situation, and I think that's always maybe the important thing is to.
What I thought afterwards is what I wish I'd done if I hadn't got so scared was just like smiled at him and gone, "Sorry, mate, have a good day." Like he's giving me this
kindness.
I just go, "Look, my bad. Take the lane in front of me. Like I'm sorry. Like I didn't mean to get you angry. Have a great rest of your drive." Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, kill them with kindness. It's a good way. There's this phrase in France they have, and it's called "spirits of the stairway." And no, it translates as "spirit of the stairway." It's called "esprit de l'escalator" or something like that. And it means the moment when you find the answer, but it's too late. And it's often used in this context of you have a interaction, but maybe there's some conflict or something, and then you say to yourself after, "I wish I said that," or "that was the perfect thing I should have said," or I think I think I should have dealt with it this way, and it's a lot of life happens like that. But I think that's only used with these novel experiences. I only think you say to yourself, "I wish I did that." When it's a novel experience and you had a chance or there was an opportunity or something a little bit different, because you don't always think about it like that, but it's something that everyone does.
Yeah. Are we going on to my last point is very short.
Yeah, I think we're going to your last point.
Okay, so this is part of this is a small bit part of my reading of Rick Rubin's The Creative Act, and he's talking about the power of the beginner's mind, and he puts a great analogy of talking about the child's mind and childlike perception, and how the child's perception and the child's mind, if we can step into that mode as an artist, as an adult, it can lead to great creative work. And I extend that to, I think it leads to a great life. And I think I've posted before, maybe not on the podcast, but maybe just to people in my life, that I think when we mature out of childhood, we lose something. And I think as we get older, I think many people rediscover something they had as a child, kind of an inner settlement, I guess, a contentment with who they are and what their life is about. Because as a child, you can't really have existential crisis. You can't have a crisis of self. You don't feel like society's pressures. You are just kind of dancing in the present moment and experiencing everything for the first time and finding joy in that and prioritizing play as the highest value. And I think that's why sometimes the child's view of what the world is has great wisdom to it. And it's something we should hope and aim to rediscover as we get older. But anyway, this paragraph that Rick Rubin wrote, that I really like, because he said, he was talking about the power of naivety and sort of this child's mind, child perception thing. And he wrote, "These childlike superpowers include being in the moment, valuing play above all else, having no regard for consequences, being radically honest without consideration, and having the ability to freely move from one emotion to the next without holding on to story." I like that a lot. Especially like there's bits in there like obviously we talked about valuing play and being in the moment, but the idea of children are radically honest and children are moved from one emotion to the next without holding on to it and holding on to its story and its grip. And so I think there's a lot we can gain from that. And like obviously before we started recording, you mentioned a comment that had been left on one of something we posted of somebody saying like every time they listen to me they feel broken because they don't get enjoyment in the simple things like I do. And I feel that's because I have some elements of a child's perception on things. And it's not something I'm blessed with. It's just like a skill I think you can develop. The skill of noticing. And that's something Rick Rubin talks about. The skill of noticing, the skill of awareness. And that opens your life up. Mindfulness opens your life up. You have the same experience, but if you're mindful of it, it opens up, it flowers, it blooms in ways that you wouldn't usually experience. So
yeah, I mean by the way, I've read the Creative Act. It was good. It was a good book. I think it was one of those I did really efficiently with listening to the audiobook at speed and reading it as well. But yeah, it was very good. I think the opposite is cynicism, which I associate with age, and it's weird because we get a lot of the haters and stuff. Their profile pic, they're like 40, 50, 60, and I think they're jealous of that youthful curiosity that we have. And yeah, I think all the other characteristics, children are really in the moment, and children do have this kind of loose grip on reality maybe and how they switch between things, and everything's new to them, and they're very enthusiastic about life still. And the cynical old people, they envy that because they don't have it. So
yeah, it's a good way of engaging with the world.
Yeah. My dad just knocked on my door. And I guess, yeah, just don't life seriously, and I try not to be, and stay youthful. And remember that you were once a kid. So you look at kids and you'd be like, oh, I was once them, and I had a curious mind, and my whole life in front of me, like everyone was a baby once.
Life was once all about playing. And yes, there are like serious material demands, but if you can somehow get those in check and like make it still about play, like an artist does, because that's one thing Rick writes about, isn't it? Everyone's an artist, no matter what you do. Your life can be a piece of art where you value play above all else. And if you can get the material demands enough that you can survive in this world, prioritizing play above all else is a fantastic way to open your life up. So
also, children, they're not rational, they're not logical.
they're driven by desire, like we talked about a couple of episodes ago about the erotic and the leading your life by decisions and desires that you cannot explain rationally but feel right on a deep level. They rumble something in your core, and I think children are so much faster to follow those things than adults, because immediately the intellect comes into us and goes, yeah, but what about this logistical point, and what will these people say about it, and how will that affect your reputation, and what about how much money you earn, and what about how you're seen by your in the social hierarchy, all these kinds of things.
I got asked by a friend, do you think we live more in the rational world or the emotional world? And I said, well, a lot of the decisions we make are more emotional than rational, so I would say emotional. And then he kind of went at this with philosophy. Apparently there's two kind of contrasting areas of philosophy called continental and analytic. And continental is about experience and sort of right hemisphere, whereas continental is quite left hemisphere. It's very kind of precision, putting things in logical arguments and chains of reasoning and things like that. And there's a lot of maths in it and things. And I link that because I don't know if we can necessarily bring about that childlike state. I don't think it's possible because we have our obligations and responsibilities. But to me, the best philosophers, they have both the continental and they have both continental and the analytic. Aristotle, he is able to put together one of the best works on ethics, but I think he was the first to discover that the earth was round instead of flat. Or Descartes can put together some meditations on how he thinks, how he proves the self exists, but you can also do some really good work into coordinates, and he contributed a lot to mathematics and geometry. So I think rather than having the two at war, the cynicism and the childlike spirit, we can have them both and be really good at both, hopefully, because I think that's the only application that we can provide. Is like they both have a use in a way. It's good to have a childlike spirit and say to yourself, when you're doing something that's a risk and you fail, you can say to yourself, well, in 10 minutes, no one's really going to care. They're all worried about their own lives, and it's going to be, we only live once and we're infinite people trying to figure the world out. But then there'll be other times when you're working on your passion and you don't want the logic to kind of suppress that passion, and you want to keep your emotion, really feel things, and maybe you're contributing to an art and you want to really feel that emotion and channel it. Well, then the childlike right hemisphere is going to be very important there. So I think, to me, that would be the solution.
I think you've touched on something really quite profound there that I think could be a great point to end this episode on, which is the power of being a paradox in the world. Can you simultaneously have the maturity of a wise adult and yet a playful, childlike approach to reality? Can you simultaneously adopt the philosophies of the internal drill sergeant and the Alan Watts? Right? Can you work very, very, very hard and master something in the world, provide value to the world through your skills and your competence, but at the same time have a loose grip on the outcome and a loose grip on your work, and detach your ego from your skills and the things you do? Can you simultaneously be strong and fierce and deadly in the physical world, in the psychological, intellectual world, but also have a very gentle side where you don't use that force for anything but good? And can you attack the world with great power and sort of and with assertiveness, but also, you know, relax when you need to? Can you switch on and switch off? Can you be a paradox? Can you be an enigma? Can you be someone that people can't really figure out? Because I think there's power in that, in Robert Greene's work, in being that paradox. Can you exist in two worlds at once, and can you take the positives from both? Because that can be powerful, not only for, you know, how you're perceived and all that, and how you perform in the world, but just be your own self. And I think that mastering not just one side of a spectrum, but mastering the positives of both, that's an amazing thing to aim for.
And when I use the example of dealing with evil people, I think it's more valuable to be capable of all those different sets of skills of dealing with that evil person. And if you are, then you can pick through the one that seems more appropriate. Now that's kind of happened. We both had a very violent, a verbally violent experience. Now we have had that once, and we kind of know how to respond to it a little bit better. And I think a great man is able to bark in the way that they're capable of barking, and that they're in the way that sort of Machiavelli says it's better to be feared than loved. In a way, the fear, I think if you're a threat, then you're a protector, and it's good to be a threat in that way, in that you're capable of it, and you're a force to be reckoned with. Like, you have that power behind you, but you don't have to use it. You can still kill people with kindness. And if you've got those other tools in the skill box, then you're a multifaceted, very competent human. And
it's like when I think it was Carl Jung that said, you can't really be a moral person until you understand your capacity for evil, right? It's very different. Let's say being gentle. If being gentle is your only choice, into comparing that to being gentle when you have a real capacity for, you know, being ferocious. There's a complete difference there. You know, the same way you talked about a dog archetype, the same way a dog could bark at a threat or rip a threat to shreds if it's like, you know, an Alsatian or a husky kind of dog. But in the same night, it could cuddle up to its owner and it can that love. You know, there is something to it like it.
Yeah, I like that. I will wrap this one up. 106, I think. Thanks for listening, everyone. If you could be so kind, if you enjoyed this, to leave a 5-star on Spotify, that'd be really nice. And yeah, thanks for listening.